Good afternoon. I decided to use the microphone this time because I got yelled at last time for not speaking loud enough. So, welcome everyone to Town Square. I'm Catherine McDermott. As many of you know, I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and I specialize in caring for patients with dementia. I'm also a co-owner here at Town Square. I know many of you know me, but welcome to those of you who are new. And the way I usually run these programs is I'll talk for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then kind of open the floor up to questions. But don't be afraid to stop me in the middle of the presentation if something doesn't make sense to you or you have any questions. So today's topic is when caregiving becomes toxic. And so I had a lot of thought put into this one. And I really wanted to try to not just hit on the usual, get some help. And so we're gonna go over some of the common sense kind of things that go along with this, but hopefully we're gonna give you some other things to think about too. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is understanding caregiver challenges. And that sounds relatively simple, but when we go over it, I'm going to see if I can challenge you all a little bit to think about things maybe a little bit differently than you do. Promoting healthy caregiving, and then resources and key takeaways. I feel like I'm fading in and out. Okay, I think I'm back. Okay, so let's talk about understanding caregiving challenges. So when we think about what we're doing for our loved one who we're caring for, we're supporting them daily with many different things that we're doing for them, right? So we're making sure they're safe. We're making sure they're clean. We're making sure that they've eaten. I was talking to a family member just the other day, and she was saying she was visiting with her husband who's in a memory care unit, and he was really angry. And it was about 11:30, 11:45, and she realized he was hungry. And as soon as they brought him over to the dining room and he got some food in him, he calmed right down. And we talk about that in that it is your responsibility as the caregiver to be able to look at what your loved one needs, what those needs are, because they're no longer able to express that to you. And that takes a lot of brain power. That takes a lot about thought, right? We have a hard enough time sometimes taking care of ourselves. Now we're 24/7 responsible for another human being. So these are just some of the things that we do in terms of providing that daily support. Preventing wandering. How many of you worry when your loved one is in the house that they're going to walk out that front door, right? How many of you are afraid to walk into another room because your loved one may fall if you're not right there with them, right? And medication errors. We typically have our own medications that we're doing. And now we're a pharmacist. We're doing the job of making sure the meds get provided from the provider, that we pick them up, that we have enough of them, and that we're dispensing them correctly, and that we're administrating, right? It's not quite as simple as just, oh, I'm going to give them his pills. Well, give him his pills. We've got 5 or 6 different steps that go along with that, right? And that's where I talk about a lot of times. I'll make mention of when you are the #1 caregiver for somebody who's in stage 5 or stage 6 of dementia, you are doing the job of 6 full-time people. Okay? And probably not doing them all well, because trying to do 40 hours worth of work 6 times over in your work week is a lot of work for one person to do. Let's talk about care coordination. So we talked about managing the medications, appointments, paperwork. How many of you feel like you spend your life doing paperwork? Filling stuff out on the computer, managing. It's time consuming. And for those of us who are technology challenged, like we were with the microphone, it's not uncommon for us to sometimes take ourselves longer. One of the things I did when I was working on this PowerPoint was got halfway through it and I lost it. How many of you have done that with a form you completely filled out, right? Because the autosave wasn't on. Something very simple, but it wasted 2 hours of my life that I'll never get back. Transportation. We talk about it here at Town Square all the time. You're going to drive them 30 minutes here, then you got to drive 30 minutes home, then you got to drive 30 minutes here to pick them up, then you got to drive 30 minutes home. That's 2 hours a day in your car. It's a lot of time. When you have to, if you think about it like at least I think about it like I did when I had my young kids. It's not so simple to just throw them in the car and go run an errand. It requires a lot. The same thing is true of our patients with dementia, right? You have to explain it to them, but you have to explain it to them in a simple way. That's not over explaining, right? So it's simple enough for them to say, okay, I'll get in the car, but then that may bring on a whole other host of questions, which now you're trying to think about where you have to go and how you have to get there and what your errand is that you're running. And you're now talking to your loved one who has dementia, so they'll understand what you're doing. How many of you have been in that situation? Right. Okay. And then tracking behaviors and changes in order to share with clinicians. And I'm in the process of writing my book, which will hopefully be coming out in the next couple of months. But one of the sections that I'm putting in there is a checklist for you to have a place to put down changes in behavior that you see, because we forget. And it happens for me a lot of times because patients will come in with their loved one and they'll give me, this is what the behaviors are, and I document them in the chart. And then they come back 6 weeks or 8 weeks later and they go, I don't remember if he was doing this back when I saw you last. And I'm able to pull it right up and say, yep, this is what you told me. That journaling, that tracking is so important because the changes that you're seeing for your loved one can be quite insidious. They're slow and they're quiet until they really creep up on you. And then all of a sudden it feels enormous, but it's really been going on for quite some time. So if I can, and I know it takes time, and that's the other thing, here I am talking about how you have no time for anything, right? And I'm asking you to do something that takes more time. But this is something that's valuable. And it can be literally 5 minutes at the end of the day where you just jot down, was incontinent of urine today, was able to use the bathroom today, was able to button his own shirt today. Just quick little notes for yourself so that you can flip back a couple of months later and go, oh yeah, I see what he was doing then, and now I see what he's doing now, because otherwise the days just run together and it's very, very hard. And it can be very helpful. I mean, I always tell people, I know I'm different than many other providers, but I like those details. I like that information because then it helps me figure out how to help you and where we're at, right? When people come in and say, how's he doing? Oh, he's fine. It's really not helpful. I need to know exactly what's happening, right? Because then when I know what's happening, I can really kind of help you figure out how do we dissect this and figure out the right things that we need to do, whether it's medication or non-pharmacologic interventions that we talk about. Okay. All right, emotional care and communication. I talk about this a lot. Using calm cues, right? Validating the emotion. I know you're upset right now and you don't want to take a shower, but you need to jump in the shower before we have a cupcake. And I'm always using food as my reward because it is a reward for us. We all love a ice cream or a piece of chocolate. We've got the little bags of M&Ms here at Town Square that the staff use on a very regular basis when we take our members to the bathroom. They'll go to the bathroom if they know they're going to get an M&M when they're done, right? It works really, really well. And the nice hard covering keeps them from melting in your hand. They're really like the dementia's best friend is M&Ms. But sometimes they're, you know what, they want to go for a ride or they want to, watch a TV show or whatever it is that you know is their comfort or what they like to do. Use that as the reward for when you need to get them to do something, right? And also validate that emotion. Always validate the emotion. I know you're not happy about this. I know you're upset. I know you're angry. I know this isn't the way you wanted it to go, right? The more we validate, the more they feel heard, even though we're not changing what we're doing, right? It's the old analogy we talk about. You bring your 5-year-old to school the first day, and they come home and they go, yep, I didn't like it. I don't want to go back. Well, you don't say, well, you don't have to. You say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you're going back to school tomorrow, right? So we don't change what we're doing, but we at least validate the thoughts and emotion that they're feeling. Okay. And then we adapt routines as their abilities change, and we keep dignity central. And this is where a lot of times I talk to people about letting go of things that are just not important. If they want to wear the same shirt every single day, go out and buy 3 of the same shirts and just wash them so that they can wear the same shirt every day. I don't really care if they show up here in Town Square with plaid shirts, shorts, and a striped shirt. Nobody has to be a fashion plate. And we hold ourselves to such high standards that we create our own stress. And when we learn to let go of these things that don't really matter when we're caring for somebody with dementia, we can significantly bring our stress down. Does that make sense? This was a really interesting slide for me as I was putting this together, because I was thinking about the emotional landscape that you all go through in the caregiver role. And one of the things that I don't think that we really focus enough on and give credit to enough is that love and purpose can coexist with anger and resentment. Well, let me say that again. Love and purpose can coexist with anger and resentment. How many of you in your caregiver journey have felt yourself get angry at the situation, at your loved one, at the disease, at the frustration that you face every day? Do you still love them? Do you still know what your purpose is and your role is? But those two groups of emotions coexisting with each other is very much what contributes to the caregiver stress. I talk a lot about grieving, and I have many of my families that I take all the way to the end of the journey. And when their loved one dies, the loved one who is left is really fine. They don't need to grieve anymore because they've been grieving the loss of their loved one slowly as they've watched them decline and change from who they were. And it's recognizing that and really allowing yourself to feel that grief that helps you move forward. And it helps lessen the anger. I'm not going to say the anger is going to go away. The anger is going to be there. You have a good reason to feel angry, right? This isn't the way you wanted it to work out. Nobody expected to go into their marriage and have to take care of their loved one or their parent during their retirement years, right? It wasn't the goal. It wasn't where we thought we were going to be, right? You wake up one morning, you're like, how did I get here? And you're angry about it. And that's a reasonable emotion. But validating that for yourself is really important as well. And stress rises as dementia progresses, right? It gets harder. It does not get easier. I tell people that all the time. This is going to get harder. And so we have to have those lines in the sand that we need is when caregiving for you is going to come to an end, or when it's going to shift. Because even if you do decide to move your loved one into a memory care unit, it doesn't go away. You're still the caregiver. You're still the person who's responsible for your loved one who lives in that memory care unit. Yes, you have a significant amount of support, and it's not the day-to-day, hour-to-hour, 24/7, but your brain is still thinking about all of those things that you need to do to support your loved one. So it's a shift. It's not complete alleviation of the caregiver role. The caregiver role only goes away once our loved one passes. One of the hardest things that I hear from many of my families is that it's hard not to take the person with dementia's behaviors personally. And one of the things that we know happens in dementia is that their personality traits intensify and get a little bit worse as they get older. I saw a couple today who lives in an assisted living facility, and the husband's a little snarky with the wife. And he's always been a little snarky with his wife. But as he's declined cognitively, he's become even more snarky and short-tempered with her and just sort of resistant to anything that she said. It's her idea, he's not doing it. Well, now that he's got dementia, and even though they live in the assisted living facility, and this is another issue in terms of couples living in assisted living, a lot of his care still falls on her because she's the person in the room with him. Versus if he was by himself and he could just call the call bell and a staff member came in, but that oftentimes doesn't happen. She winds up providing that care. And so it's hard for her not to take it personally when he's like that with her. And I'm sure all of you at some point have felt that, like, why is he behaving this way? Or why is she doing this? Or, she only does it to me. And so a lot of times it's really helpful when we can also tell family members, oh yeah, we see that behavior at Town Square. And then they're like, oh, good, it's not just me, right? It's really not personal towards you. Although it may feel that way because it is just a perpetuation of their personality that they had prior to becoming cognitively impaired. So spotting the warning signs are for you. When does caregiving become toxic? It becomes toxic when you become irritable, when you become numb, or frequently tears just burst into your eyes. And I've had many caregivers come to me and say, I can't stop crying. I'm literally in the middle of doing nothing and the tears just pop out of my eyes. That's when you know that as a caregiver, you are now being taxed to the point that it is unhealthy for you. And that's when you have to reach out for help. Whether it's to your primary, whether it's to me, whether you go on Psychology Today and find a social worker, a therapist, or somebody that you can go talk to. But these are the signs. When these things start happening and last for longer than 2 weeks, you are meeting clinical criteria for clinical depression, for generalized anxiety disorder, for caregiver role strain. You're not sleeping. You don't really care if you eat anymore. None of that is good for you. And it's a direct relation to the amount of stress that you're under due to your caregiver role. One of the things we talk about in therapy a lot of times is naming what we're feeling, right? And I think that that's really true with the anger situation. I think a lot of times we feel that anger rise up, but we never really say out loud, I'm really mad. I'm really angry that this is happening. And there's so much power to getting that emotion out, to actually naming it and feeling it and validating it for yourself. It takes a lot of the power away from it. You don't have to say it to anybody. You don't have to say it to your loved one, certainly. You don't have to say it to a family member. You can sit in the bathroom by yourself and just get those words out and name what you're feeling. And the relief that you feel from that will start to be palpable as you do it. 4 deep breaths, name the emotion, 4 deep breaths. Okay? All right. And then again, share with clinicians or support groups. I hear every time we have the support group how helpful it is to everyone here, that they really find that they get a lot of benefit from talking to other people who are going through the same thing. All right, so let's talk about physical toll. Wear and tear on your body. How many of you like bending over and putting your loved one's shoes on? How's that working for your body? Right? It's hard enough to put your own shoes on. So ongoing fatigue, headaches, sleep disturbance, low energy. Stress can worsen your chronic conditions. This is why the statistic that the caregiver will die 66% of the time before the person with dementia dies. Yes, 66%. And again, it's because we're taking care of them and we're not taking care of us. Lifting, transferring, bathing, toileting. How many of you have got a good back? And constant vigilance. At the stage that most of your loved ones are at, they require constant supervision. And even if you're not necessarily with them 24/7, you're thinking about that supervision that they're having. So you're still owning it. It's still a stress on you. You don't minimize that for yourself. How many of you skip meals, miss appointments, or have poor sleep? Neglect to raise issues of illness and caregiver injury because you don't have time to deal with it. Just going to keep going because I have to. Who else is going to do it if I don't do it? All right. So we've talked about what they are. Let's talk about recognizing them. Why does it happen? Because we have too many tasks. And this is, again, where I talk about minimizing the things that are important to you, that used to be important to you. If you were somebody who had to make your bed every morning, and it makes you feel good to make your bed every morning, still make your bed every morning. But if you get out of bed in the morning and you've got to get your loved one dressed and off to Town Square, you've got things to do, and that bed doesn't get made, the world is not going to end. If your laundry stays in the laundry basket and you live out of the laundry basket, the world is not going to end. Look at the tasks that you can minimize and minimize those. Eating, sleeping, taking rest periods for yourself are not things you can give up. Those are the things that you have to focus on. If not putting the laundry away means that you have 10 or 15 minutes to sit and relax and maybe read a book or get yourself something to eat, that's more important, okay? The decisions piling up is kind of an interesting concept too, in that, again, when we're overwhelmed, we tend to put things off, right? I have to make a decision about this, right? I've got to figure out what I'm going to do about having 2 cars now that he's not driving, or what am I going to do about the car insurance, or, do I pay extra this year on the mortgage, or all these major decisions that we have to make. We tend to procrastinate on them because we're just overwhelmed with life. And some of those decisions can be really important. So those are the things that you have to take that time and use that little extra time that you've given up something that's not important to do. Again, we talked a little bit about the warning signs: irritability, short temper, constant frustration. Withdrawal is really where you really start feeling trapped and alone. And a lot of my families will tell me that they feel socially isolated, right? That the neighbors don't want to hang out with them anymore because their loved one can't carry on a conversation. They're not a couple anymore, right? And so they find that their circle is getting smaller, and that's harder for the caregiver because they really look forward to talking to people and having that social interaction. It was really interesting. We recently had a member who passed here after being at Town Square for about a year. And towards the end of his life, his wife began having caregivers come into the house. And she said to me that she was surprised at how much she enjoyed having the caregivers in the house. And I said, why? She said, I have somebody to talk to. She was telling me about the young lady who was going back to nursing school and how she, was telling her all about her life. And she was fascinated by it. And she didn't have anybody to talk to for so long that it was nice to have another person in the home that she could have that conversation with. And I think we forget that, especially for those of us who are taking care of our spouses. How long has it been since you've been able to have a conversation with your loved one like you used to when they were cognitively intact? That's something to grieve. That's a loss. And it's something that you need to validate and think about that emotion so that it doesn't overwhelm you. Burnout. What does burnout look like? Burnout looks like, I know I'm not supposed to leave him home alone, but I can't be with him anymore. So I'm going to leave him here and I'm going to run to Publix. That's what burnout looks like, because you're not supposed to do those things when your loved one can't be left alone. And the risks of toxic patterns, and this is that whole idea of when caregiving becomes toxic, when you resent them. It's very, very difficult not to develop resentment when you're doing everything for your loved one and you don't really feel like you get anything in return. And nobody really understands how hard it is. You meet the neighbors, and they're like, oh, Joe looks like he's doing great. And you want to choke them, right? Because, yeah, in that 10 minutes you talk to him in the grocery store, Joe looks fabulous. Joe can't find his way to the bathroom in the house anymore. That's not wonderful. That's a lot of responsibility on me. All right, so we talked about this, resentment, harsh tones. How many of you, and I don't want to show of hands, because I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand on this one. How many of you have yelled at your loved one and then felt horrible afterwards, right? Okay, we all do it. And I tell every single one of the caregivers I talk with and take care of, everyone does it, everyone. There is no Mother Teresa out there in the caregiving world of dementia spouses or children that are caring for their loved one. There is going to come a moment when you just get so angry that you yell at them because you've told them for the millionth time to do something or not to do something or how to do something, and you are just at your wit's end. So give yourself some grace, please. When it really becomes a problem is when you start missing your own meds and skipping your meals and having unsafe supervised gaps with your loved one. So why it happens is because we're chronically stressed, we're losing sleep, we have nonstop vigilance that overwhelms our coping abilities. And our role strain is doing too much with too little support. So I've kind of led you right down the path of where we're going to go to help make caregiving less toxic, right? So we have to begin to recognize these things so we can prevent burnout, right? And so we can continue to take care of the person with dementia. So early steps to prevent the escalation is to basically begin to understand where these things are and when we need to get some respite, when we need to get some help. Because if we let it escalate to this point, it's really hard to ask for help. And that's why I want you all to think about before you get to this point, to start making those sacrifices of things that are just not important, that you just don't need to do anymore, because you need to have some time for yourself. It's not going to last forever. All right. So define what you can do today and revisit it weekly. I remember when I was in my 20s and 30s, I'd have a list this long of stuff I was going to get done today. And pretty much I'd get it done. Now my list is this long. And I struggle to get it done. Right? And I'm not caring for somebody with dementia. I'm just aging. So you have to look at your list. You have to look at your expectations. What are you setting yourself up for? Do not set yourself up for failure by having too many things on the list. It's why I'm not a big fan of the holidays, because the holidays just make our lists longer, right? And set up even more expectations for us and are even harder for my caregivers. Share tasks, right? Say no to unsafe or impossible tasks. Your friends want you to come and bring your loved one to somebody's 50th birthday party and there's going to be 100 people there. Nope, not happening. Not going to be able to keep an eye on him, not going to be able to keep him safe, not going to be able to manage his anxiety in that situation. You have to limit those things. And then you have to grieve the loss of those things because you really wanted to go. Or you get a caregiver to come in and take care of your loved one so that you can still manage to go to some of these things. We're going to talk a little bit about that more. You're going to aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Well, how are you going to do that if your loved one's not sleeping? So if your loved one's not sleeping, reach out for help so that your loved one can get medication to help them sleep. There are lots of good sleep medications for patients with dementia. Schedule daily breaks, right? Give yourself the grace that you need some time for yourself. And it needs to be something that you want to do. Don't tell me that you're scheduling time to get the laundry done. Nobody wants to do the laundry. Nobody wants to do the dishes in the sink. You want to go for a massage? You want to go for a pedicure? schedule a time for yourself to do this.